When I lost my job, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stood in the break room of Franklin and Milton Digital Media Solutions, which is a fancy way of saying, "We make Instagram ads for brunch spots," and stared at the manager like he'd offered me a free dental consultation instead of a layoff. "Budget cuts," he said, shrugging with all the compassion of a DMV printer. "It's Tuesday," I replied. He nodded like that explained everything. Now, to be fair, I should have seen it coming. We hadn't had coffee pods in the office for 3 weeks, and the company ping-pong table mysteriously went out for repairs and never came back. Also, the CEO had started sharing articles on LinkedIn with titles like "The Hidden Upsides of Failing Fast." Still, it hurt. I packed up my stuff, one sad plant, a mug that said, "Big ideas start with caffeine," and a USB drive full of ad campaigns no one watched. Then I walked home through sleet, in dress shoes with a cracked sole, thinking, well, at least my rent's not due until Friday. It was $1,100. I had $92.17 in my checking account, and $3.47 in quarters in a jar labeled "Emergency Tacos." I wasn't proud to ask for help. But pride doesn't pay rent, and eviction notices don't care if you're figuring things out. So I called the one person who, technically, brought me into this world. My mom. Now, for context, my mom was the kind of woman who considered therapy an overpriced chat, and believed any non-desk job was a phase. She once told me, in complete sincerity, that Uber drivers were just boys who missed the school bus and never found their way back. She answered on the second ring. "Hey, Ma," I said, already feeling 12 again. "What's wrong?" she asked immediately. My mom never asked. "How are you?" She skipped straight to worst-case scenario. "I lost my job," I said, bracing for either sympathy or shame. "Oh." Pause. Then, "What happened? Showed up in sweatpants one too many times?" "No, Mom. Layoffs. Company downsized." She made a noise that sounded like an offended cough. "I told you. That social media nonsense was never a real job." I clenched the phone tighter. "Mom, I need a favor." Pause. $1,000. Just to cover rent. I'll pay it back." That's when she laughed. Not like a nervous giggle. Not even one of those "I'm disappointed but still technically maternal" chuckles. She laughed. "Maybe if you had a real job," she said between actual snorts. "One with benefits. Stability. Not some content nonsense." I was silent. She kept going. "You remember your cousin Thomas? Works for the city? Has a pension? Never once asked us for a dime." "Okay," I said quietly. "Maybe this'll be good for you," she said. "A wake-up call." I nodded slowly, even though she couldn't see it. "Sure," I said. "Thanks for the chat." Then I hung up. I stared at the wall for a solid 5 minutes. No thoughts, just pure, numb. Then I stood up, packed my bag, and left. Not just my apartment. The city. I called my landlord, broke the lease, sold the TV, gave my plan to the neighbor downstairs who once complimented it, and said, "This feels like a good energy plant." By sundown, I was on a Greyhound headed 3 states away. No job. No savings. Just one very loud sentence echoing in my head. "Maybe if you had a real job." I landed in a city I hadn't seen since I was 11. My Uncle Pete lived there, or used to. He was the family anomaly. Former electrician turned antique clock repairman. Lived in a 2-bedroom above a bookstore, and never responded to group texts. Which is exactly why I called him. "Come by," he said. No small talk. When I arrived, he didn't ask questions. Just pointed to a pull-out couch, handed me a mug of coffee that somehow tasted like wood and cinnamon, and said, "Bathroom's down the hall. Don't hog the hot water." That was it. I spent the first 3 nights half sleeping on springs and self-pity. My phone battery died somewhere on the second day, and I let it stay dead for a while. No job alerts. No missed calls. No mom quotes about learning lessons the hard way. Uncle Pete left early every morning and came back smelling like sawdust and soldering oil. I didn't know where he went, But he always returned with something: old clocks, lamp parts, one time a typewriter with no keys. You fix stuff? I asked. I listen to broken things, he replied, tapping the clock on the table. I didn't push. On the 5th morning, he handed me a set of work gloves and said, "Let's see if your social media hands can hold a screwdriver." We started small, polishing brass, sweeping sawdust, learning which tools were for real use and which were for show. Pete was patient in a gruff, vaguely threatening way. Like he wouldn't yell if I messed up, but the screwdrivers might. The work felt good. There was something about fixing gears, cleaning old grime, making things tick again. It didn't pay much, but it gave me something I hadn't felt in a long time: stillness. Focus. Purpose that didn't come with Slack pings and espresso breath meetings about brand synergy. On weekends I took side gigs, assembling furniture, fixing leaky faucets, even teaching a kid down the hall how to patch drywall. Turns out, I was good with my hands. Not in a romantic, Hallmark movie way. Just competent. I learned to patch what I broke, sharpen what dulled, tighten what rattled. And slowly, the ache of that phone call with my mom stopped ringing in my ears. It was replaced by the creak of old floorboards, the smell of lemon oil on sandpaper, and Uncle Pete muttering things like, "This damn pendulum's drunk again." A year passed. I upgraded from the couch to a room. Then from odd jobs to consistent ones. A property manager offered me a gig repairing units around the block. Then 2 blocks. Then 6. I became the guy with a toolkit and a reputation. Reliable. Quiet. Knows what the hell he's doing. One night, Pete and I were eating microwaved chili over a game of poker when he said, "You gonna call your mom?" I shook my head. "She called me," he added. "Few months back. Asked where you were. I said fixing something." I smirked. "And?" She hung up. That was the last we talked about it. I didn't need to explain. Pete understood what it meant to be laughed at by people who never really knew what you were made of. He saw me. And maybe that's what made the next part so strange. Because the moment I stopped trying to prove I was worth something was the moment life handed me a door. A literal one. A busted Victorian oak door, cracked in 2 spots, belonging to a rental property owned by a woman named Marlene who ran a local community group. "You fix this," she said, "and I might have more work for you. Bigger stuff. Regular." I fixed the door. Marlene called back a week later. "Can you restore a porch railing?" "Yep." "A whole kitchen floor?" "Sure," she grunted. "Good. You're hired." And just like that, I wasn't floating anymore. I was building. And not just repairs. A business. A life. A version of myself that didn't feel like a punchline to a mom joke about real jobs. But that didn't stop the past from creeping back in. Not yet. That part came later. With one voicemail. From a motel. The porch railing groaned when I touched it. "You fix this," Marlene said, "and I'll give you a shot at something bigger." She didn't smile. She just crossed her arms like a human contracts department, and watched me work like she was waiting for me to lose a finger. Marlene was the kind of woman who'd once let a tenant revolt, won, and then charged the landlord a consulting fee. She wore paint-splattered boots, had a laugh that could scare squirrels, and managed 3 buildings near downtown, all with more problems than tenants. That first job was simple: wood rot, rusted brackets, and 2 screws that snapped the moment I touched them. But I handled it. Slow. Careful. Just like Pete taught me. When I was done, she walked over, pressed on the railing, and said, "You know, that's the first time in 2 years it didn't move like a drunk uncle." Then she tossed me a check. Just $120. But it felt like $10,000. Not because of the amount, but because of the words at the bottom in the memo line. "Porch, good job." She called again the next week. Then the next. By month's end, I'd repaired 2 stairwells, patched 6 holes, refinished an entire kitchen floor, and rewired a ceiling fan that looked like it belonged in a horror movie. I started getting other calls. "Hey, Marlene said you fixed things? You the guy who repaired the Miller unit? My bathroom sink sounds like it's gargling ghosts." I wasn't marketing. I wasn't even trying. I just showed up. With a toolkit, some sandpaper, and a reputation that I hadn't even realized I was building. Pete noticed too. "You're booked every damn day," he said one night, while we both watched an old clock tick correctly for the first time in 30 years. "When you gonna stop pretending this isn't a business?" I shrugged. "Feels weird. Like I'm cosplaying as someone responsible." "Boy, you're one clipboard away from a tax bracket." He wasn't wrong. So I leaned into it. Got a website. A basic one, just a landing page with a photo of a wrench and the words, "We fix stuff." No drama. It blew up. Apparently, there was a real demand for honest repair work that didn't come with passive-aggressive sighs or TikTok intermissions. By spring, I had 3 regular property clients, a waiting list for private work, and a phone that buzzed more than it ever did back when I made memes for cafes. The irony? This job, the one my mom wouldn't even call a job, was the first one that made me feel like I belonged somewhere. I wasn't just fixing things. I was building something. Quietly. Steadily. No champagne launches, no business cards made from recycled bamboo. Just results. One day, I passed a mirror on the way out of a building and had to do a double take. Same face. Same tool belt Pete gave me. But I looked solid. Grounded. Like someone with a purpose. And that's when it happened. The message. From an unknown number. 3 sentences. "Hey. It's Mom. I know it's been a while. I need to talk. Please." No emoji. No. LOL. No laughing this time. Just silence and a motel callback number. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I turned it off. And went to fix a busted water heater. I didn't call the motel. I didn't even Google it. I just left the message there, tucked between a plumber's invoice and a screenshot of a customer who Venmo'd me a tip with the caption, "Finally, someone who doesn't treat drywall like it's a suggestion." But silence has a way of stretching out, filling all the quiet corners. The next day, a voicemail. "Landon. It's your mother. I'm staying somewhere off Route 12. Look, things aren't great. I was hoping we could talk." She sounded tired. Not the usual. I had to park 2 blocks away from the salon. Tired. But the kind of exhaustion that comes from a place deeper than annoyance, maybe even regret. It was strange. The woman who used to turn off the Wi-Fi when I forgot to vacuum was now calling from a room that probably didn't have working AC. I almost didn't recognize her voice without the condescension. The day after that, another message. This time she didn't say much. Just, "I shouldn't have laughed. I didn't know it would be the last thing I ever said to you." Click. I sat with that one. Not because I was moved, but because I wasn't sure whether that counted as an apology, or just another roundabout way of avoiding one. It's a weird thing, hearing your mother admit, in the smallest possible way, that she might have messed up. Like watching someone try to eat humble pie with a toothpick. I sat on the porch that night with a lukewarm beer and Bruno, Marlene's overweight golden retriever who'd adopted my porch as his summer home. He was snoring under a tomato plant, totally unbothered by generational trauma. "Should I call her back?" I asked. He sneezed. I took that as a no. I told Pete about the messages. He just grunted and said, "Deadbolt's still working?" "Yeah." "Then sounds like you're good." Later that week, Marlene stopped by to drop off a check for a busted sink I'd fixed with duct tape and prayer. "You good?" she asked. "You look like someone made you watch your own high school talent show." I told her everything. Not because I wanted to, but because she dropped her bag, sat down in my patio chair, and said, "Start talking or I'm telling everyone you can't fix garbage disposals." When I finished, she leaned back and crossed her arms. "She's not reaching out for closure," she said. "She's reaching out because karma finally knocked on her motel door and asked for rent." I raised an eyebrow. "You get that from your therapist?" "Nah. Judge Judy rerun." I laughed harder than I had in weeks. Then I got quiet again. "She didn't even say sorry," I muttered. 7 messages. Not one actual apology. Marlene didn't say anything at first. Then she asked, "If she did, would you have picked up?" That hit harder than I wanted to admit. The truth was, I didn't know. Because even if she did say sorry, would she mean it? Or would it just be another manipulation? A prelude to, "Can I stay with you for a bit until I get back on my feet?" That night, I played the voicemails one last time. 7 total. Each one sounding smaller than the last. Like she was shrinking into herself. And still, not once, did she say the words. So I sent her something. Not a check. Not a call. Just a link. www.finshelterno.org. A list of local shelters, assistance programs, emergency funds, and places that actually help people who need it. That was it. No. Thinking of you? No. Wish things were different. No warm little olive branch wrapped in guilt and forgiveness. Just a reminder that help exists. She just wasn't going to find it in me. Then I powered down my phone, clicked my flashlight on, and crawled under an elderly woman's porch to fix a busted pipe because life moves on, even when your past is leaving voicemails from a roadside motel. 3 days after I sent the link, she called again. I didn't pick up. So she texted. Wow. Not even a call back? After everything I did for you? Ah, there it was. The moment she switched from, "I need help," to, "You owe me." Classic move. Right on schedule. I stared at the message like it was a scratch-off ticket that revealed nothing but the word, "Try again." Then I tossed my phone onto the workbench like it had started leaking. I went back to fixing a broken cabinet hinge for a tenant who had lovingly named his apartment the Crumble Shack. But my phone wasn't done. 2 missed calls from the motel. Then one from a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. It was my Aunt Carol. "Landon, honey, it's Aunt Carol. Listen, I know things have been bumpy. But your mom's not doing well. She's proud, you know that, but she's really struggling. Just be kind. She's still your mother." Right. The woman who once told me I was wasting my 20s chasing hashtags. And once mailed me a job application for the post office with a note that said, "Something with a pension, finally." The guilt train wasn't done. Next came a Facebook message from my cousin Emily, the one who still lives at home, posts MLM skincare reels, and calls herself an entrepreneur because she made $42 last month. "Hey, I don't know what's going on, but maybe don't let grandma's only daughter live in a motel?" That one got me. Not because she was right, but because she was so confidently wrong. Like I was just out here sipping cocktails on a yacht named Not My Problem, while my mom wept into a vending machine sandwich. I didn't reply. But inside I was storming. Because none of them knew. Not one of them knew what it was like to sit on the other end of the line, humiliated, asking for help and getting laughed at like you were the punchline of your own rock bottom. They didn't see the nights I skipped dinner so I could stretch rent. The mornings I shaved in a gas station bathroom because the pipes froze. The months I lived on side gigs and stress rashes. They didn't know what it was like to rebuild from zero, with no safety net, no. Just come home. No mother's voice reminding you that you mattered more than your job title. They just saw a motel, a sad voicemail, and thought, "Why isn't Landon being nicer?" Even Pete said something. "I get it," he muttered while soldering a gear in place. "But don't let your anger rot you. That stuff spreads." "I'm not angry," I lied, which was hilarious considering I was currently sanding a stair spindle like it owed me back pay. But he was right. Anger is sneaky. It feels like control until it's not. So that night I wrote a message. Drafted it anyway. It said, "I'm not your lifeline. I'm not your guild project. I survived without you. I'm still surviving. And I won't go back to the version of me that begged for crumbs. Not even for a moment." But I didn't send it. Because some things don't need to be said. They just need to be lived. And I was already living them. Instead, I walked to the kitchen, made a cup of tea I didn't even want, stared out the window for a full 10 minutes, then texted Marlene my next availability. Because the truth was, I wasn't a broken kid anymore. I was booked. And that, in its own quiet way, was closure. It was raining the day she showed up. Of course it was. The universe loves drama. I just finished fixing a busted railing on a third-floor walk-up when I got a call from Marlene. Her voice was dry as ever. You got company. Who? She says she's your mother? Wearing what looks like every beige clothing item known to mankind. Standing outside your building like she's auditioning for a sad commercial. I didn't answer right away. Want me to tell her to scram? Marlene asked. I got no problem being the villain. No, I said. I'll handle it. I took the long way home. Stopped by the corner store. Wandered the aisles. Bought a bottle of lemon iced tea I didn't even want. I let the rain soak through my hoodie as I walked slowly, deliberately. I wasn't stalling. I just didn't want to arrive angry. Or smug. Or unsteady. When I turned the corner onto my block, there she was. Just like Marlene said, beige trench coat, beige scarf, beige cardigan. She looked like a human latte left out too long. She saw me and didn't smile. Just said, "Hi." I didn't stop walking. Just nodded and said, "You're standing in the rain." "I don't have anywhere else to stand," she replied. I unlocked the front door. Held it open. She hesitated. Then stepped inside like the building might spit her back out. We stood in the hallway like strangers in a doctor's waiting room. Water dripped from her sleeves and darkened the floor. Her eyes swept the space. Tools. Boots. A small shelf of books. A couch that sagged slightly in the middle. No family photos. No evidence of a life she had any part in. "Pete's not here?" she asked. "He's out," I said. She walked slowly into the living room and sat on the edge of the couch. Didn't ask. Just sat like it was a courtroom bench. I leaned against the wall, arms crossed. She took a breath like she was winding up for something, then paused. Looked at the floor. Then the wall. Then back at me. "I saw your website," she said. "Looks real." "It is." "You really built all this?" "Yep." Another long pause. "That link you sent?" she began. "It works," I said. "I checked it before I sent it." "I didn't ask if it worked," she snapped. "I asked why you thought that was all I deserved." There it was. Not sorrow. Not apology. Resentment. Like I was the one who left her behind. I stared at her for a long moment. "You want to know why?" I said. "Because when I needed $1,000 to stay in my apartment, you laughed. And I never forgot what that felt like." Her face twitched. "I didn't mean it like that." "No? Then how did you mean it? As a lesson? A joke? A motivational speech in disguise?" She blinked. "I was scared," she said. "You sounded so defeated. I didn't know how to help." "So you made it worse?" She didn't answer. We sat in that silence for a full minute. The fridge hummed. Water dripped from her coat into a small puddle on the floor. She looked older, but not wiser. Just worn. Then I said, "I'm not angry anymore. I'm not even bitter. But I don't owe you a single inch of myself just because you share my blood." She stood up slowly. Smoothed her coat like that would fix anything. "I didn't come here to fight," she said. "Then why did you come?" Her lips parted, then closed again. Finally, she said, barely above a whisper, "I wanted to see if you'd made it." I nodded. "Well," I said, "you have." She looked at me like she wanted to say something else. Maybe sorry. Maybe nothing. But she didn't. She walked to the door. No hugs. No closure. No, let's try again. Just the sound of wet boots on linoleum and a quiet door latch behind her. I stood there for a while. Didn't cry. Didn't scream. I just wiped up the puddle from the floor, took off my damp hoodie, and opened a bag of pretzels. Then I sat in the exact spot she'd been and turned on the lamp. Peace, I realized, doesn't always arrive in joy. Sometimes it arrives in the silence after someone finally leaves for good. The next morning, I woke up to 8 unread messages and 3 missed calls. All from family. Emily, of course, had already turned my mother's visit into a Facebook status. Sometimes people just need love. Especially moms. Don't wait until it's too late. Accompanied by a stock photo of a sunset, and a crying emoji, like the universe needed a passive-aggressive Hallmark card. Aunt Carol's voicemail was longer. "Landon, I heard she came by. She said you didn't even let her stay to dry off. I don't know what happened between you two, but she's still your mother. That line again. Like it's a get-out-of-consequences-free card. Like blood is a coupon for unlimited forgiveness, no expiration date. But the worst one? My brother Max, the family favorite. Max, who once made fun of my toolkit Christmas gift but now has Project Manager in his email signature. We hadn't spoken in 4 years. His message: grow up, man. She raised us. You're acting like some abandoned orphan. She made mistakes, so has everyone. Get over it. I didn't reply. Not to Max. Not to Carol. Not to anyone. Instead, I got dressed, pulled on my work boots, and walked to the job site Marlene had lined up, an old fourplex with sagging floors, haunted wallpaper, and a radiator that sounded like it hosted weekly exorcisms. I didn't bring headphones. I wanted the quiet. Wanted to feel the screwdriver in my hand, the weight of the hinge I replaced, the solid thunk of a door that now finally latched without pleading. Manual work. No metaphors. No subtext. Just reality. Something my family never quite respected me for living in. By the time I got home, my head was clear. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't disappointed. I was just done. Done performing my pain for people who already wrote their version of the story. Done being the villain in someone else's redemption arc. Done being told to get over it by people who never bothered to understand what it even was. Later that week, I stopped by Pete's to help him move a dresser. When I walked in, he gave me one look and said, "She finally showed up?" "Yep." "Say what you needed to say?" "Didn't have to," I said. "She did it for me, by not saying anything at all." He grunted in approval. That was Pete's version of emotional support. We lifted the dresser in silence. The good kind of silence. The kind where someone doesn't need to say "I'm proud of you" because they pass you the heavier end without flinching. That weekend, I did something I hadn't done in years. I booked time away. Not to escape, just to breathe. A little off-grid cabin 2 hours out. No Wi-Fi. No cell service. Just woods, firewood, and a coffee machine older than my car. I brought one book, a thermos, and a bag of tools in case the cabin tried anything stupid. The first night, I sat on the porch, warm drink in hand, hoodie zipped up to my neck, and just existed. No notifications. No missed calls. No one waiting for me to fold. And I realized there was no one left I needed to explain myself to. Not to my mom. Not to Max. Not to people who sent sunset quotes and guilt-wrapped text messages. I hadn't just survived. I had built. Not in defiance. Not for revenge. But for me. Because I finally understood something. Peace isn't loud. It doesn't knock. It arrives quietly, sits beside you, and stays, even when the phone rings. About a month later, I got a letter. Not an email. Not a voicemail. A real letter. Return address, no name, just the same motel she'd called me from weeks ago. Inside was a single page. Handwritten. Tight, slanted cursive I hadn't seen since she used to leave notes on the fridge like, "Clean your room." Or, "Stop microwaving metal." No. "Dear Landon." No date. No warm opening. Just this. "You were right. I wasn't a good mother. I didn't know how to love a son who didn't fit the life I imagined. I hope you're well. I don't expect you to write back." That was it. It wasn't a grand apology. It wasn't closure in all caps. But it was something. I read it once. Then tucked it between 2 pages of a book I hadn't finished, Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, one Pete lent me years ago, and said, "It'll either confuse you or make you cry. Maybe both." I didn't cry. But I did sit there, in the same spot she once occupied on my couch, and breathe for a while. Not deeply. Not dramatically. Just long enough to let it pass through. I didn't respond. Didn't send a thank you. Didn't quote it to anyone. I let it be what it was, a brief acknowledgement scribbled too late on motel stationery. She'd written it, yes. But I wasn't about to follow it up with a clean slate invite to my life. I never heard from her again. Word trickled in through the family grapevine that she moved south, some program near the coast. Someone said she volunteers now, helps cook at a halfway house. I don't know if that's true. I didn't ask. And I didn't follow up. But I kept the letter. Not out of sentiment. But because it reminded me I hadn't imagined it all, the phone call, the laugh, the silence, the motel. And the moment I chose myself. The moment I stopped trying to fix something that didn't want to be repaired. That link I sent her? www.thinshelterno. Work. I still keep it bookmarked. Not for her. But for anyone else who finds themselves where I once was, humiliated, broke, and told they should have done better. Sometimes family doesn't pick you. Sometimes you have to pick yourself, and start building from there. My hands are callous now. Not from begging. From building. And every time I tighten a bolt, seal a leak, or watch a room come together, I think, this is the real job. The one I made with my own 2 hands.